Gay, talk, live. That's right, Gay Talk Live every Saturday. Hey, everybody. It's August 2011. My name is Tom, and thank you for tuning in to Queer Public Radio. Oh, goodness, I think it was about a week or so ago. I talked with a gentleman named Joe Quigley who contacted me. And I started doing a little research, and he sent me some links. And this is an amazing person, an unsung hero. He's humble, he's honorable, and in my mind, definitely an unsung gay hero. So today, I'm going to share with you some tidbits, some bits and pieces of clips and stuff. When I initially spoke with him, when was it? I think it was Thursday, just a couple of days ago. We spoke, and I recorded the conversation and got some tidbits on it. We all know there's far too many unsung gay heroes in our world and in our world's history. Joe Quigley is a teacher. He's technically retired now, put his years in. He's a teacher who happens to be a member of the LGBTQIA community, a very proud member indeed. In fact, in late 1997, while teaching at a very large high school in Oklahoma City, about 1,400 students if I remember correctly, Joe was approached by a fellow teacher. Because Joe evidently has never been the type of guy who would try to hide his sexual orientation. That's just not Joe. Well, this fellow teacher approached him, and she told Joe a story about a local student who had died attempting to cross a 6-lane highway up there in Oklahoma City. The teacher that was telling Joe the story felt that the student's death was a suicide that was related to bullying in the school. Evidently, the student had confided in the teacher on a couple occasions about different things, so this teacher was a little concerned that the student's death was ruled an accident. This event would be the spark that lit the flame. Joe Quigley began a journey that he thought would be fairly short-lived. 12 years later, and after much turmoil, his goal would be reached. He lost his job over it and spent many hours in front of the school board in Oklahoma City, and even had to go to court over losing his job. We'll hear more about this. In fact, this is just like what I hope to be the first of 2 different episodes we're going to do surrounding the story of Joe Quigley. In 1998, Joe Quigley took the Oklahoma City School Board, who, by the way, are elected officials, to court. To task. Yeah, he wanted them to add sexual orientation to their diversity policy. Joe was fighting against bullying 12 years before it became mainstream, and he was doing so in one of the most hostile environments imaginable, Oklahoma. When Joe lost his job, it became a legal issue. Joe reached out for help from some of the big not-for-profits in the LGBT community. They all basically told him, because of small budgets, the economy, etc., they only expended resources on cases they felt they could win. Of course, these days, now that bullying has become the popular thing, quote-unquote, some of those very organizations seem to be quite interested in the issue. So I got I think it's about 7 clips for you here, each one in various lengths, and then I'm going to throw some comments in between each clip, and that's kind of like what we're going to do today for our kickoff around Joe Quigley, because instead of me telling the bulk of it, I think it's best coming from the horse's mouth, and Joe's such a well-spoken gentleman, and I think we need to hear it from him. We jump around quite a bit in this conversation. It's not chronological in any way, shape, or form. We're jumping all over the place. But you get the gist of the story of what this gentleman went through, the Cliff Notes version I just gave you. So I think we ought to get on with it. Here is the first clip that I put together where I spoke with Joe Quigley just a couple days ago. So I read some of your stuff. I was digging around. I found that gayokc.com site.
Yeah. It was a trip, to use an old term. But we got the language in. We finally got the language in. So, actually, I should jump way ahead in the story. After my court business, I don't know if you read that part, where they tried to fire me. And myself and the union took the district to district court, and the judge favored me because it was rather obvious. They were trying to get rid of me as the gay teacher and pretending it was because I was incompetent, but they couldn't prove any of that. And we had come up with an agreement. I didn't have to do it, but we decided we'd offer something to the district that even though they were supposed to put me back at the school I had been at, if they didn't do that, I wouldn't appeal that if they didn't appeal the case and if they added the word sexual orientation and gender identity to all their policies. And at first they refused to do that because it would be too close to my case and I would have won big time, and they didn't want to give that. And then about 4 weeks after the case was over, one of the school board members decided, well, he's going to look good, and he brought up we should add sexual orientation and gender identity to the district policies on non-discrimination, bullying, harassment. And he sort of gave away that he was using our language. So we finally got that stuff in.
Oh, I think that was amazing, but this is a battle that took a little time, wasn't it?
Took 12 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Which, hey, for Oklahoma, that was a very short time.
Oh, yeah. With Sally Kern.
You've read about her?
Oh, that's come, my God.
Yeah. She taught down the hall from me, and she's used me twice in her speeches. Not by name, but one time she was trying to explain that she had no bigotry against gay people. Right? After all, she taught down the hall from this gay teacher, and she had no problem with him, and it was me, except it was my faulty choice of lifestyle. So she tried that, she's not a bigot, but her heart went out to me, that sort of a thing. Then at another meeting, she wanted to show how bad the gay agenda was, and she explained that she taught down the hall from this gay teacher who was totally obnoxious, pushing the gay agenda in everybody's face. And it was like, wait a minute, Sally, last week I was somebody you loved with your Christian heart, and now this week you're claiming I'm some sort of an obnoxious agenda pusher. So she's a nut. She's crazy.
Yeah, she is. Big time. Yeah, when I was reading all that material about the poster on the door, the poster inside the door, the poster outside the door, the poster hanging in the room, and all this rigmarole around posters.
Meanwhile, whatever you had up about Christian stuff was okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was the killer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think you were making all the right moves and saying all the right things. It's amazing, how you stated in there that these other history months, such as Black History Month, etc., didn't have to jump through hoops. There was no problems. But when it came to Gay History Month, all of a sudden you had to jump through hoops. So.
Yeah, you read about that paragraph J, right? You had to get the principal's permission.
Yeah, for the posters?
Yeah. and it was addressed to all the faculty, and I'm the only one that got a copy.
Right.
It's a little too obvious to me. A little too obvious.
Yeah, and I like the part where they put up a display. Technically wasn't a poster.
Yeah. It was stupid.
Yeah, I was a little curious about the incident you had there when you had the poster with a lot of pictures of gay people in history. And from the circumstances, the way it occurred, the hours that it occurred, it could only have been an employee there. Which picture did they cut out?
They cut out King David.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah, and the principal, at this point, he was getting nervous because it was kind of like he found out about gayokc.com. He found that on the internet. And somebody pointed out to him, you're doing too many things, back off a bit, And the investigator, who was an administrator from downtown, her thing is if it was anti-gay, then the whole poster would have been destroyed. But the fact that they didn't even cut from the edge into, because I put King David right in the middle. They didn't cut from the edge in. They came and they cut a perfect circle around him. So her assessment was it was targeted. It was some religious person making sure that people didn't realize that there were certain things in the Bible that pretty strongly hint that King David was gay. So she told the principal to knock it off. So she was in my favor. She came up to me a couple of years later and told me, she goes, that was so freaking obvious. She didn't say freaking, but it was obvious to her that this is this bigotry.
Yeah, and then the little story about your push cart, where they took away your room and put you as a traveling teacher. Quote unquote.
Yeah. And they didn't put any of my rooms near each other. That was the other thing. I went by 3 empty rooms to get to the rooms I had to go to.
Yeah, I like that. They tried to tell you they didn't have any room for you.
Yeah, we don't have any room. What are these 3 things here, But, and then there was that one guy, Villarreal, was his name. He used to do things. He was an assistant principal, and, you couldn't prove it. But anybody with half a brain could tell. What kid's going to come in on a weekend and steal a rainbow flag off a push cart?
Mm-hmm. Valuable stuff, yeah.
Leave the VCR and the Bausch and Lomb sunglasses and all of that. It's like, come on. Either the kid's really, really stupid, or it had to be somebody with a key.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think it's kind of obvious, the whole thing that was going on, But I give you accolades, because you did the right thing. You stood up, To me, you're a hero.
At a certain point, I just got so pig-headed, I think it was. It's like, enough of this. I'll see this through till the end if I have to. But it did get dicey for a while.
So did you actually get to continue your teaching career, or did it just mess you up permanently?
No, because at the end, I don't know if you get to the part of the court case with the judge's decision where she apologized to me as a parent that I would have to put up with this to try to teach. And after that, it was they sent me to a school it was a failing school, which was kind of stupid to me, that if they claim I was a bad teacher, why would they send me to a failing school? And after that, there was a lot of harassment, subtle things. Like the school, I don't know if you ran into any of this on the internet, but the school had been on the failing list for 5 years, and 4 years. And when I got there, it was the 5th year, and they go through what they call a turnaround model, which is a phony way of saving the school. And the principal has to release all the faculty and can only hire back 50%. And, of course, needless to say, I, like all the other teachers, was let go, but I wasn't part of the 50% that was hired back. So it was a subtle way of trying to destroy my reputation. You know, they did stuff like that. And then when I got hired at a bird school, it was the principal. It was kind of obvious he was out to get the teachers who had been at the first school that was a failing school, and he puts me on a 34-page plan of improvement, which you couldn't complete that. Absolutely could not complete that. And one of the things on it was some of the kids didn't understand my sense of humor, and therefore I was belittling them. You know, stuff like that. And I was like, no, they just have poor vocabulary and no sense of humor. So what it came down to was they were going to try a second time to get rid of me. And that would have been, you know, too much. So I offered them a buyout, is what it came down to, so that it wouldn't ruin my reputation. I can technically teach anywhere except Oklahoma City. Yeah, and I gave them the offer. It was, I will resign if they paid me for the remainder of the year, they kept up my insurance, that it would go on my record as I retired, and they couldn't, I couldn't sue them for anything that happened previous to this agreement, but I could sue them for anything they said or did afterwards if it was an extension of the harassment. So they had to be, like, really nice to me. And I got a whole semester off, full pay and everything.
That's just, yeah, I know we're jumping all around, but back in the beginning, I think I read, you know, this the catalyst that got you going here back in, I think it was 1997, was a suicide?
Yeah, there was a kid. I didn't know her. I never met her. But there was a teacher at the school that knew that this kid had a really whacked out home life. And there was sort of a bond between that teacher and the student. And she came up to me in the fall of '96, it was, because the week after the 8th grade graduation, this particular student was hit running across the highway, hit by a truck. And she could have gone under the highway. And the teacher was concerned that everybody was saying it was an accident, but from what she was getting from the kid and their confidence conversations, and also the girl had been put a couple of times on suicide watch, and this teacher would be notified to, you know, keep an eye out in case there was something that could push her over the edge. And she came to me because she was concerned it looked like an accident, but it might have been one of those deals like death by cop. Mm-hmm. You want to commit suicide, but you let the cop shoot you. Mm-hmm. So she figured it was death by truck. And she was very disturbed because we had one of those born-again Christian guys on the faculty who could say whatever he wanted, you know, Christian-wise. And he was over the top, like somebody who gives up smoking cigarettes. They have to try to get everybody to stop. Mm-hmm. And the good teacher, I'll have to call her that, the good teacher was in the library kneeling down on the floor looking at the lower books on a shelf and heard this teacher, the Christian teacher, approach the girl and tell her that, you know, God does not like her lifestyle and she needs to accept Jesus. And she figured, you know, this might have pushed the girl over the edge. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one thing to be harassed by middle school kids who are cruel by nature, but to have an adult and a teacher especially kind of tell the kid, you know, if you thought anybody loved you, even God hates you. So that's what got it going. You know, she came to me. I didn't know what to do, but she came to me because I was openly gay and I was the union rep. And she just said, if there's anything you could do, of course I thought it would take 3 or 4 weeks. Didn't know it was going to take 12 years. But she said, you know, if there's anything I could do, could I please do something? And that's when I did a lot of this reading. Are you familiar? I can't even speak. Familiar with Rem Selby? There was in '89, George Herbert Walker Bush had a commission that studied teen suicide. And there was a chapter about gay and lesbian suicide. And it didn't go into the final report because it wouldn't go along with his constituents. And this guy, Dr. I forget his first name off the top of my head, but Dr. Remfeldy used the Freedom of Information Act and got a hold of that chapter. And that's where the statistics came out, like gay and lesbian kids are 5 times likely to attempt suicide and 3 times as likely to complete a suicide attempt. And when I read that, it was like, we can't have this going on. And his recommendation is like simple thing, workshops for teachers. You know, you can be as bigoted as you want at home, but once you go in the classroom, you got to accept who's ever in there. But that was the impetus of the whole thing. What could have been, that was never proven, or it wasn't even investigated as a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, one of the board members at a meeting mentioned to me that maybe something should be done before we have a suicide. And I pointed out that as far as I was concerned, we already had one, which was obviously one too many. And that got some of the school board to reconsider things. But again, it's Oklahoma. So you have to put up with a lot of Jesus stuff.
No, yeah.
And not the good Jesus stuff. You know, there are good Christians, and then there are Oklahoma ones.
Yeah, I usually say good or bad myself, but hey, Oklahoma seems to fit just fine. I'm sure there's very few good Christians there, that's for sure. Hey, but the whole suicide thing was kind of the catalyst, though, that got you to go to the school board, right?
Yeah. The first thing was, just writing letters saying, this could have been a suicide. We don't know how. One of the things Remfeldy points out in his book, it's called Death by Denial, was what they call the invisible suicide. Kid runs his car into a tree. Everybody thinks it's an accident, but no, it was really a deliberate act. So I just figured pointing that out to the school board. I mean, we had in-services on Hispanic students, Asian students, etc. So why not one about gay kids? And it seemed a no-brainer to me, but the minute, for a while there with the board, anything gay was political. And there was one magic moment, I don't know if it was in the stuff you read, but the union president at the time set up a meeting with himself, me, and a deputy superintendent who happened to be a rather large man from New Jersey. And at one point in the meeting, he was, talking constantly about, well, we don't need political issues. We don't need political issues. And then he admitted that when he was growing up in New Jersey as a little fat Italian kid in middle school, he would go home and his mother would feel bad for him for getting picked on for being fat and would feed him. And his thing was, I had my mother there to help me. And I said, okay, imagine if you had gone home as a little fat Italian kid who was just picked on at middle school and your mother threw you out of the house. And that got him, because he could identify with that. And that's when he turned to the union guy and he said, so this isn't a political thing. It's been a student thing all along. And then that started some momentum. But unfortunately, that was like 98. But it was still another 11 years before anything happened.
Such a long battle, and so in front of all these other, this gentleman was doing, 10, 11, 12 years before everyone else, and he was out there all alone, That gayokc.com site's been mentioned a couple times in that first clip, and that's where initially I found a heck of a lot of information. They actually have a subdomain there for him. It's called Quigley. That's Quigley www.gayokc.com. If that confuses you, you can put www in the front. www.quigley.gayokc.com. Of course, OKC stands for Oklahoma City. Yeah, quigley.gayokc.com. There is so much stuff there. I haven't even finished reading through it all. And then Joe turned around and sent me a whole lot more. Yeah, so like I said, we're going to plan on having another episode about Joe. Probably more details about the legal case itself. But in this particular clip that we just heard, the loudest message for me in this clip was how humble Joe is. You know, I personally greatly admire that in a person. I think the second largest message in this first clip was about the student's death, which was ruled an accident. I think when Joe said she could have went under the highway, I think that kind of speaks volumes. I'm going to try to get some more details in the future on our second show. I'm going to try to find out if Joe even knows how far away that would have been, how much of a detour that would have been for that young lady to walk under the highway. The book he mentioned in this first clip is called Death by Denial. It's written by a Gary Ramafedi. I'm guessing that's right. I saw several. It's Remafedi. Death by Denial is the name of the book. You can Google Death by Denial and you'll find a heck of a lot of information out there about it. Let's get on with this second clip we got from Joe here. Goodness. Yeah, and what was that part about? You were going to the bars, to the drag shows, or a drag show in the evening to give them updates of your progress?
That was they call it in Oklahoma City, it's called the Rec Room, and it's a juice bar for kids in the gay strip. And one of the drag queens would have me, whenever there was any movement, she'd ask me to, give some news to the kids. And, I got to do that and it was one time when the legal thing came up that we have to protect all kids, and I was able to read that statement. And that was a nice moment. But then again, it was another 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, I got the feeling from what I read that maybe you felt they weren't very appreciative, or maybe you were even a little bored, some of them, with your little reports. But then you got one where you got a standing ovation, and that made the difference.
Yeah. And that's like when I would talk to my parents back here, it was like, what are you doing it for? And I had to tell them, that moment, to have the kids actually acknowledge that, it was a good thing. And I said, at that point, how can you walk away? There's got to be the language. Because in 2003, we had a superintendent write me a letter that, oh, yes, of course, it includes the gay and lesbian kids in those policies. And it's like, okay, so why are you afraid to say it? You're going to write me a personal letter and say gay and lesbian kids and are included in the non-discrimination bullying policy. Why not put it down in writing so everybody knows it? So they just wouldn't say it.
Right.
That was the frustrating thing. It was left up to the interpretation of individual teams.
Let's talk to a minute about the characters in your story. One of them you referred to was Rebel Without a Clue, and he had evidently another girl that just worshipped him, and she said she used to rub the back of his neck during audiovisual moments when the lights were turned down low. So when the Rebel Without a Clue went, to complain on you one time, of course she went with him, and the two of them ran into this other girl in the hallway, and she decided to go with them as well, and she's the one that ended up being the little liar, saying that she wasn't even allowed to bring her Bible to school, and then her father got all involved, and that was the girl in the hallway, right?
Yeah, that was the one they ran into, yeah, and that was when I found out I was going to be on Fox News. By getting they were going to have a meeting the next day to talk to me about taking the poster down, and the next thing I know, I'm getting called by the local Fox News about, what do you think of your reprimand? I don't have a reprimand. You got to watch the news tonight.
They knew before you.
But it turns out, I found out later, I don't know if I haven't really looked at like the gay OKC stuff for a while, but the father took that girl out of the school because they thought they were pro-gay, tried to enroll her in another high school in the city, but the principal refused her admission because her thing is she didn't want that problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this girl lied to her father. The father gets on television and further lies. She doesn't need that in her school, so the girl ended up getting homeschooled. Kind of like things come back to haunt you. In her case, the principal of the high school she wanted to go to had been the principal at the middle school that was very supportive. Who this was the principal when the news article came out that said somehow she wanted to know. She goes, "How did you demonstrate that you were gay?" Because in the newspaper article it said he demonstrated he was gay, and I don't know what that phrase meant. So this particular principal, her enlightened moment was when she told me, anytime a person says I am gay, the first thing that kids do is try to picture that person having sex. And that was her concern. And I pointed out that on one corner of her desk, she had a picture of herself and her husband. And on the other corner of the desk, she had a picture of her children. And I said, okay, the kids come in, they're sitting here, you're bawling them out for something. They see a picture of you and your husband. And they look over the other side of the desk, they see a picture of your children. I said, you don't think they try to figure what it looked like with you and your husband having sex to produce those kids? And that's what her thing was, I never thought of that. So she became an ally because she understood there was certain things that heterosexuals take for granted,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't even dawn on them that they're passing messages. But the minute like a gay person says, I'm gay, ooh, look at the secret messages the kids can read.
Mm-hmm.
So she became an ally at that point because she realized, yeah, she had an advantage. She could advertise her sex with pictures. I couldn't even hint at it.
Right.
And that's the school that, we call it a bitch, that decided to try to go to. And this principal was, nah.
That was a story about the girl that wanted to go to the prom but didn't have a date, so she wanted to bring her sister.
Yeah, and they wouldn't let her go because it would look like a lesbian. And we actually, the ACLU gave me a paper. We went to the principal. They did change the process. That you couldn't, because technically, if they don't discriminate, then why couldn't you bring her sister? The only thing in that case is the father understood the importance of the fight, but the older daughter was going to graduate in a couple of weeks, and the younger daughter could always go to another prom.
Right.
So he was a protecting father. I can understand his case. He could get didn't want to get his daughters involved in that, but he was mad that the older sister couldn't bring the younger one, only for appearance's sake.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta ask you, does the school now have a GSA, that school there that you taught?
No.
Not surprised.
Well, I don't know if you read the section about what happened with how the formation of the GSA was used against the gay kids. I don't know if you got to that part.
Oh, I didn't get to the.
This is sad. This is really sad. We had the principal at the high school brought over a friend of his, I should say, who was from another school, and she was a lesbian and became our vice principal. And when I was following the paragraph J and I asked permission to have a display that October, he hands the request to this lesbian vice principal. And she turned it down. And her reason for turning down the display is, since we didn't have a gay club, then you can't have a display. But at that time, we didn't have a Native American club or a Hispanic club, but they could have displays. And when I went to her with that objection, and sometimes I don't know if we believe in God, but it's either coincidence or there is a God. I went to her office alone, thinking, hey, here's a gay man going to have a conversation with a lesbian. You know, we might have a fist fight or something, so let's not have any witnesses. And another teacher had followed me downstairs to be next in line to talk to her. And when I pointed out we didn't have a policy in the district that said if there is no gay club or any club, you can't acknowledge the existence of the kids who would be in the club if it existed. And this lesbian says, well, as far as she's concerned, there are no gay kids in high school. You only become gay later on.
Wow.
And the other teacher, who happened to be straight, just screamed when she heard that. And then the lesbian vice principal tried to get that teacher to say that what she really heard was, I don't know of any gay students at this high school. And the straight teacher was going, no, I heard what Quigley heard, and that is, you said there are no gay kids in high school. They become gay later. And she actually worked for the enemy, I would say. She was trying to become principal. She had her eye on becoming principal. And we tried to have, the union helped a lot. As a compromise one October, instead of having a gay and lesbian history, I'm going to say gay history because all those letters, I can't say all of them. So I'm just, when I say gay, I mean the whole thing, GLBTIQ, LMNOP, whatever. But when I wanted the Gay History Month display, the union suggested, since he was having a hard time with it, that I be allowed for the month of October to give out information on GSAs to any student who might be interested, which seemed innocuous. You know, if no kid came up to me, no information would be given out, and he would get away with not having a display. But instead of doing that, he wouldn't let the announcement be made that I had the information. The union had to fight him on that. By the time he finally agreed, yeah, he misunderstood our agreement with the union. It was November, so it was too late anyway, which was kind of nasty. And then he allowed the announcement to finally be made 3 days before graduation. So he could say, well, we tried to have one, it just didn't work. The following year, with the lesbian vice principal, he violated the law. He assigned her as the moderator of the club. And with the Equal Access Act, the teacher can supply information, but the teacher can't organize the club. It has to start with the students. And the students have to go to the principal, ask if they can have a club, and they find their moderator. What the principal did is he assigned the vice principal to be the moderator, and he went and chose 2 kids. One was obviously lesbian, she made no bones about it, and another kid who was, he was questioning his own sexuality. And he chose those 2 kids to be the leaders. So he violated the procedure all along. And instead of having public meetings, this vice principal would have quiet meetings in her office. And then, yeah, and then when the following October came up, she writes me a letter that now that they had a gay-straight alliance, they would take care of the Gay History Month display, but they could only get information from her. And when the 2 kids went to get information, all she did was give them a poster board and some markers and told them to go do their own research. And the school had the filter where you couldn't find anything gay on the internet at the school. So they went to, it was called the Young Gay Lesbian Association, YGLA, yeah. And that was a organization in the gay strip. And I used to give little talks there about gay history to the kids. So I went there one night with everything I had in my classroom. They put together their display, using my information. They couldn't come to my classroom to get it, so they had to do it at the YGLA group. And when she put the display together, instead of having it at eye level where you could conveniently walk by, she put it on a shelf in the library in the main hall, way at the bottom, like almost level to the floor. So if you wanted to look at it, you had to crouch down. And for me, that was another subtle way. And even a black teacher came up to me and said, "Now they're really being subtle with their sexism, because what kid is going to bend down, squat in the hallway, read the posters without being accused of, oh, you must be gay, you must be a lesbian."
Mm-hmm.
So she actually, by doing that, she discouraged kids from seeing the display. One of the kids had, on her poster of famous lesbians, had put "Lesbians Rule." And the vice principal replaced the heading with "Famous Women in History." So she even, she took the word lesbian out. And I fought with her constantly about that. It's the whole idea of the GSA is not to be shamed. It's to promote understanding. But if you're having silent meetings or quiet meetings one-on-one in your office, and you never announce a meeting, or they're never present, they weren't in the yearbook when the beginning of the year, the following year when they had the club day and all the different clubs advertised, there was nothing about the GSA. So I interpret it as she wanting to be the next principal, did everything she could to cooperate with the principal at the time, and he knew that, so she cooperated with him. And that didn't go over too big in the community.
Yeah,
She's now living in Vancouver, British Columbia. And sadly, she had been in a relationship for 25 years with the same woman, and nobody knew it. And then this is the woman, the principal, the anti-gay principal, puts in charge of the GSA. But that was a sad thing. And for me, that was kind of an abuse, because they were actually using the gay and lesbian kids as their tools. Because the two kids they picked were just so thrilled that the principal trusted them that much. And they were too naive to understand, no. You're the excuse for them to be able to control because all information had to go through that vice principal from that point on. And no information ever got through.
Yeah, and if it did, it ended up being watered down or censored or some way. Let's go on to, back to the girl in the hallway, that said she couldn't bring her Bible to the school. It seems, a while later, you end up with her brother in your class.
The spy! Yeah. That's another thing that, knowing that was the problem. And there was three other classes he could have been in. There were three other English teachers, because it was a big school. And, when I suggested that would not be a good idea to have him in the room in light of what had happened before, the principal told the kid, if you have any problems in Mr. Quigley's class, you come and tell me. And for me, that was spying. And then a couple of times like when I wrote in chalk on the board, Gay and Lesbian History Month, and he put on a big show that, as a Christian, that offended him, and he wanted it erased. And of course, my answer to that was, there's a lot of things in life that offend us as individuals, but sometimes we just have to suck it up, and I refuse to erase it, because just because he had a problem with it doesn't mean that it has to be censored for everybody. And the principal, this is what gets me, the principal called the father and pointed out that I had a problem with the kid in my room. So if he got wind of any problem, he was supposed to report to the principal as well. So that, to me, that again was a setup. And
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
his grandmother who had the kid transferred out of my room as a favor to me. She understood what was going on.
Yeah, and you tried to warn them. You tried to be proactive and stem the problem by, requesting that they move him to another teacher. I thought that was perfectly reasonable request.
Yeah, 'cause there were, like I said, there were 3 other English teachers he could have been in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't have disrupted his schedule because there was, I think it was a sophomore class or a freshman class. It was the equivalent class right across the hall at the same time, so he could have just been sent to that one. And what was more insulting than anything is they thought I was too stupid to understand when they were doing this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so a lot of people say, "Oh, you were so dedicated to the gay thing," and every now and then, like in that case, it was like, "No, he's insulting my intelligence. I'm doing this for me, for my own validation."
For his own validation. You tell him, Joe. Oh, that was awesome. I love that ending of that clip. The reason behind something good and wonderful is seldom as important as the good and wonderful deed itself. And another important point about that clip, I loved, that we got the Benedict Arnold going on here, the lesbian vice principal of the school, who's the Benedict Arnold, who can evidently justify in her own mind turning on her own LGBT community. Interesting, huh? The other interesting point I'd like is that Joe went to some drag shows, as like that was his conduit to the younger generation, was drag shows. Of course, we're talking about the younger LGBT community, and the bar seems like a awesome place. I'm going to ask him some more questions about that in the next show. But drag show intermissions with Joe Quigley, I'm because he got a little disheartened there at first, or disenchanted, whatever word you want to use. I'm glad that he was eventually warmly rewarded, definitely. I think it's kind of ironic that he had to stem his own battle against a member of our very own community. And I think that speaks volumes, that someone can be so achievement-minded that they will basically toss aside who they are, what they are, the real them, and hide and consider that an acceptable choice. Wow. Yes, so very wrong, so very, very wrong. Let's get on with this next clip here. Clip number 3 from Joe Quigley, an awesome man, an unsung LGBT hero. Here's clip number 3. In my wanderings looking for stuff about Quigley, I found a statement that every fall, just before students return to schools, a law firm is hired by the district to see it through its legal difficulties, and they go over recent court rulings and advise the council that might have a bearing on the upcoming school year. So I found this quite interesting that if most school districts do this, wow, like they know, and they are intentionally ignoring.
Well, it's an odd thing because at a certain point, they haven't. The district has its in-house counsel, and that's the one that was doing this. And there was a point at which she told me she was frustrated because, in spite of her telling them what the law is, the administrators, for some reason, think that they're very clever and they can get around it. And this, she told me a couple of years later, was one of those situations where I had, I think it was the Nabosny case from, what was it? Not Lambda Legal, the other one. The other legal gay thing. There's so many names. Anyway, the Nabosny case about the kid, and I think it was Wisconsin and Minnesota that had been picked on, and he won his case for like almost $1 million. That was one of the things she presented. Then there was 2 same-sex sexual harassment things, and I had already had copies, and I had given her copies of these court cases, and she was surprised that fall that this is the ones that came through over the summer, and it frustrated her that they were fully aware that a kid could actually sue the district, but the administrators thought they were so clever that they could find neat little ways of getting around it. And it was fun. I think it was the Title IX thing where they actually had to go around and tell the faculties that gay and lesbian kids have to be treated equal to all others. But again, that was verbal, but nothing in writing. That was, I think, the guy they set up. There was one administrator. He was one of the assistant superintendents who was, you talk about a flaming queen. Okay, now, he was married. He got divorced and got remarried. But, I mean, come on. I mean, there are stereotypes and there are stereotypes. And this guy, if you were looking for, think of Jack McFarlane on Will and Grace.
No.
Yeah, imagine him trying to say, no, I'm a heterosexual. I'm sorry. Well, we had an administrator like that, and that's the guy they put in charge of the diversity committee to include gay and lesbian kids. And, of course, he's not going to do it because it's going to look like, there's the proof that you are gay. But he ended up having to be the one to go around because of his position and tell all the faculties that because of Title IX, we had to be very careful about treating gay and lesbian kids differently than any others.
Yeah, I like the way where you got to the point where you started telling people, things get changed around here quite a bit when it's just verbal. Could you please write that down for me?
Write that down. And they got used to that. One of the good things that happens to me anyway is because there was so many, I have 2 books of documents, emails, actually the old days of typing, and they're thick as my thumb is long, these 2 notebooks. And
Wow.
I was the only one from 96 to 97 when I made the proposal until 2009 when they put the language in. I was the only one who had been consistently there throughout. And I got everybody's email. Sometimes I'd write a letter to get them to answer, so I'd have something in writing. But the other administrators did not necessarily know what somebody else had written. So I could sit at meetings and they'd say, oh, nobody ever said that. And I could flip through the book and say, no, so-and-so on such and such a date. And I have documents that, let's say there were 5 different administrators. I had everything from all 5 of them, but none of them had everything from all 5 of each other. And they never caught on to that. For some reason, they were too stupid to realize before you say anything to him, ask him what he's got. And there were a couple of times that, there was one meeting with the attorney. She was trying to justify something, and she says to me, well, there was a court case in 2000. She goes, let me get to my file over here, and I'll see if I can find it. And I said, do you have the exact date? And she gave September or something, 2000. And I flipped through my book, and I said, you mean this one? And she, how did you get that? And I said, I'm not going to tell you, but I have it. So she caught on before she, as the school district's attorney, did anything. She would check with me first to see if I had a document before she made a fool of herself. And she was amazed a few times that I had documents that I wasn't supposed to have. But I have to be honest with you. Years ago, I was a union president in a suburban town in Massachusetts. And we had an agreement with the custodians, which is true, it's a legal thing. If a document is shredded, you can't use it. If it's torn, even in half, you can't use it. But if it's crumbled, it's admissible. And I would have my custodians go through the superintendent's trash before they put it in a big bag and they'd hand me any letters that they found that weren't ripped but crumbled. And there was one year we saved 200 teachers' jobs because I had copies of crumbly documents that the superintendent had no idea got out of his office. He thought they were thrown in the trash. So I would use that same method with the school district, if I was in an office with, say, the superintendent, and he would apologize, he had to go out to get something. He would apologize, this will take a few minutes. I hope you don't mind sitting in the office. I'll be back in about 2 minutes. I knew I had at least 2 minutes to go to his waste paper basket, and I'd pull out stuff that was relevant. But I never told them that part. They just knew I ended up with documents I technically had no reason to have, but I had them.
Yeah, I think you were kind of beating them at their own game, though.
I know, yeah, it was getting tiring, though, because you had to stay ahead, and that was the exhausting part. It's like you have to sit down, and I had to figure what would they possibly do next, and there might have been 3 or 4 things, and it was like, okay, if they do A, I've got to be ready for this. If they do B, I got to be ready for that. Thank God I didn't have a committee. Never had to take a vote.
Yeah. So you were teaching there in Oklahoma City when they had the bombing?
The bombing happened 95, so it was like a year before all of this started.
Okay.
But even in that, you could, and we did once or twice point out that it was like when the bombing happened, we had a teacher at the school I was at who was from Iran, and she had left before the Shah was thrown out. And we had to drive her home the night of the bombing to make sure that she could get into her house, because there were neighbors on the front lawn protesting her as a terrorist. And she had to send her children out of town until it turned out to be a white Christian guy that did it. But we use that as an example of, sometimes bigotry, even well-intentioned, if you can call bigotry at any time well-intentioned, is negative. So here are these people thinking they're pro-America, and they were picking on an Iranian teacher who had nothing to do with it because it was a white Christian guy. So once in a while we could use the bombing thing, but, you would think something like that would have made the city a little bit more open-minded, but it didn't.
Yeah, it's always amazing how narrow-minded some people can be. That's like after 9/11 happened. There was lots of people around that weren't even Muslim. Just because they had dark skin or wore a different kind of head dressing or something like that. Some of our Americans, the very patriotic ones, were, not doing nice things to people that were, you know.
They were foreigners.
Yeah, they were fair. It didn't matter.
Yeah. It's sad. Well, we had, I don't know if it was in that thing, but the ministers one night went nuts. I got called to the office one day because, again, the principal he kept trying to, like one year for the Gay History Month, I went through the process of asking permission and all of that, and he decided to put it on the Social Studies Department. They should organize it. Of course, they're not going to. They never did, right? They never had History Month displays. Their thing was individual teachers in their classroom put up displays like that, not the History Department. He put it on the Social Studies Department. The Social Studies Department knew exactly what was going on, put it back on him. You're not going to get us caught in the middle of this and use us as the scapegoat. And so then his compromise that year was, well, we don't know if we have a problem in the school. There always had to be a problem. And my thing is, why don't we avoid the problem? Why not keep a kid from getting beat up rather than wait for the kid to get beat up and then do something about it? So the principal came up with, well, maybe we need to survey the students and find out if there's a problem. Now, are you familiar with GLSEN? Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education. Okay, they have their school climate survey. So I think, oh, great. I went upstairs. I got a copy of the school climate survey, brought it back down to the office, and I said, well, why don't we give this to the seniors maybe? Because some of them are adults, 18 years old. Wouldn't have to worry about the freshmen where the parents would say, oh, you're influencing. But limit the survey to the seniors a retrospective survey. Did you observe any of this? Did you feel any of this? Not do you put it in the present, but put it in the past. And his thing is, well, that's got to go before the faculty advisory committee. And how we could blame them if they said no. So I made copies of the survey with a cover letter, gave it to all the members, and one of them was a zealous Christian lady, and she went to her pastor, and he gets up in the pulpit and points out at the high school they have a class on homosexuality, and they have a teacher teaching homosexuality. So that night, that Sunday night, the principal apparently had a bunch of ministers show up at his house. Parishioners were calling, congregation members were calling, complaining. The secretary the next morning told me that they had, by the time I got to school, and I usually got there early, they had already had about 20 calls from irate parents wanting the class on homosexuality stopped and the teacher who was teaching it fired. And she wanted to know from me, what the hell are they talking about? Then I got called to the office, and I found out it was the ministers were jumping the gun. Okay, and so we had a meeting with me, the union, the head pastor that had started the anti-gay thing, and the pastor eventually apologized because he had gotten the whole pot stirred, and it turns out it wasn't a class, there was nobody teaching it, it was a proposed survey that wasn't even voted on yet. So after that, we didn't have any problems with the ministers because they had embarrassed themselves with their 2 days of foolish behavior. And we got a few apologies from them. I got them anyway, for having done that. Now, they did admit that if the faculty advisory had voted for the survey, they would have complained about it, but at least, as far as they were concerned, they would really have something to complain about. But they were embarrassed that they had jumped the gun, and they apologized for their prejudice. But they didn't help. But at least they didn't harm after that.
Yeah, I remember reading about that when the principal called you in and started screaming at you. I was calling you into the office. Do you know what I went through last night?
Yeah, you know what my night was like last night? No, sir, I have no idea. And the part that got me, I had been reprimanded for not taking down the poster. Or as they described it, the mural depicting, so people thought it was pictures, but it was a list of names. I had to go through all of that, but the teacher who caused the problem with the churches didn't even have to apologize to me for doing that. She came up on her own, and she was in tears, and she apologized that she had totally misread the situation. She didn't realize it was going to blow up as much as it did. And when I asked her, I said, are you doing this on your own or because you have to be told? She told me nobody told her to do it. She was just doing it as one teacher to another, and she realized she had made a big mistake.
Well, at least realize that.
Yeah. But the thing is, she got away, in a sense, if it had gone the other way, she got away with it. Nobody had to apologize to me. The principal never apologized to me. The pastor volunteered an apology, but I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm getting in trouble for putting up a poster that's really only offensive to one kid. And this woman who caused the big problem and the pastors who caused the big problem, nothing.
Right. Yeah, because you and I both know if the situation had been reversed, there would have been action taken.
Oh, yeah. And I know there was action taken all the time. There was one point, one year when there was all the meetings. This is the funny part. The students had no problem. There was a couple that would have a problem with my being gay. But I never jumped around the room or anything. I wore my pride rings. It had been in the newspaper. It had been on television. So you had to be a real idiot not to know I was gay. And there was one of my classes It was like 3 days in a row, about 4 times each day, an office aide would come up with a letter from the principal. And it was about another meeting. Okay, so 4 notifications of 4 different meetings, like 4 or 5 days in a row. And one kid finally said, you know, they think you're the troublemaker because you're gay. He goes, but the principal seems to keep sending you love letters. So what's he mad about? So I had to say, these aren't love letters. They're notifications of meetings. And one kid goes, none of the other teachers we have get that many letters from the principal. So there was a joke for a while that the principal was my secret lover. And this was from the kids.
That's one thing I'm surprised that you had happen to you. To some kick, some kind insinuation, some kind of sexual propriety on your part.
Well, it there was one time I was waiting for a bus. My car was broken. I was walking towards the bus stop, and some kid passed me on a bicycle. And he called me faggot and kept riding the bike. And I put something up on my door about the word faggot. You know, faggot, a bunch of wood, a cigarette in England, or a bassoon in Italy. And I recapped the story that, you know, here I am walking down the street, and the kid goes by me 30 miles an hour on a bicycle, yells faggot, and keeps going. You know, where's the heroism in that?
Yeah.
You know, and the principal told me to take it down because the word faggot it can cause problems. And I go, yeah, that's the point, you dumbass. Right. And one of the things that would happen once in a while, usually it happened with freshmen. They thought they discovered something new when they found out I was gay. And when I had juniors and seniors, they'd laugh about it because, come on, you know, you could always tell the naive freshmen. But every now and then some kid would run by my room and yell faggot and keep running. And I'd always look at my classes because I wouldn't get up and run to the door to see who it was. And I would always ask, where's the heroism in that? Where's the courage in that?
Mm-hmm.
I said, if the kid really meant what he said and was really as brave as he wanted to appear, he would come in the classroom right up to me and say it and face whatever my reaction is. I said, but it's a coward who runs by the room and yells faggot and keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't have that much of a problem with the students. It was more the politically inept administration. You know, they're always afraid they're going to lose their job or the school board isn't going to get reelected. And that's where the problem was. But for the most part, you know, once in a while a kid would write faggot on the board and spell it wrong. And I'd have to explain it's F-A-G-G-O-T, not F-A-G-I-T. That's a faggot. One kid spelt it on my door in ink, faggot, F-A-G-E-T. And I explained to the class when I walked in because they were quiet. I was like, what's he going to do? A kid wrote faggot on the board. And I just walked in and I said, apparently somebody thinks this is a French class. And one of my seniors, you know, why? I said, well, they have the word faggot written on my door. And one kid goes, no, it's supposed to be faggot. And I said, no, faggot is F-A-G-G-O-T. I said, F-A-G-E-T is French faggot. And I said, I don't know what that means. I said, it's like when you guys write fuck you on a teacher's board and you forget the C. I said, it's more comical than it is threatening. So I'd have once in a while some asshole would do something, but like you figure I was in a school with 1,400 kids and maybe 5 or 6 were assholes about it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, then again, so was the principal, the lesbian vice principal. She's the one that got me madder than anything was the way she played into the bigotry instead of being an ally.
Yeah, because Benedict Arnold.
Yeah. And then when she didn't get the principal's job and they gave it to somebody else, she was mad at the person who got it. So all of a sudden she became the uber lesbian.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But she was doing it to give him a hard time. And she was kind of like trying to use me to help her get back at the new principal. And I went to the new principal and I said, I do not know what she's doing. I said, from what I can see, she's trying to give you a hard time. It does not involve me. It does not involve gay and lesbian students. It doesn't involve anything to do with the handbook or in-services. I said, so whatever she does, before you come at me for it, approach me and find out, am I part of her game, or is she, I said, because she's using the gay issue to get you.
Mm-hmm.
And he admitted that there were 2 times or so that he thought I was in cahoots until I had told him that. And then he realized she was just being an ass.
Mm-hmm.
So she was. Then she ends up contacting, this is the one that got the gay community the most. After all the hard time she gave me and everything, she contacts the advocate. And then the next issue, we didn't know this, the next issue of the advocate comes out, and there's an article with her standing in front of the school with this real butch, angry look on her face, and it was all the hard work she had been doing for gay and lesbian students. And it was everything that I had been doing. And it was like, ooh, after that, I don't care what she could have been Jesus. I would have crucified her.
Right.
But she got the gay community real, and the students at that point got really mad at her, the gay ones. That she was giving me a hard time and then turns around and pretends that, and then the other thing was, with her, she's the one, anything I tried to do relative to gay, like diversity week, if I had a list of gay people up, she would go down and tell the principal, oh, he's doing it again. So he would come up and take it down. She's the one who messed up the GSA and everything like that. And then when the new principal came in, she put something up on the bulletin board about gay people, positive things. And then she contacts the local gay press and points out that obviously she's the only one who's an effective advocate because look, all the years that we supposedly were trying to do something for the gay kids, and she came along and did it like boom, boom, boom. Okay, so obviously, she was more successful and all of this crap, but she didn't realize that the gay press in the area had all this information and the documentation. They had hard copies of emails and everything, and they wouldn't publish anything about it because she was just using the gay kids for her own ends. I couldn't wait for her to retire.
Goodness gracious. Couldn't wait for her to retire. Well, I bet, when you got a Benedict Arnold in your midst, oh, goodness gracious. You're hearing bits and pieces of a conversation I had a couple of days ago with Joe Quigley. That's Quigley. There is oodles and oodles of information available on what Joe Quigley did and went through when he was in teacher in Oklahoma City. It's on this website called gayokc.com. And if you just put Quigley in the front, you put Quigley, that's Quigley .gayokc.com. Quigley.gayokc.com. Yeah. Lots of stuff on there, and I hope to be putting more over here on the queerpublicradio.com site as well in the coming weeks here. So we're speaking with Joe Quigley, who started his battle back in 1997 to bring diversity, to bring tolerance at least. Of course, we always strive for acceptance, but tolerance at this point in time in a place like Oklahoma City, especially when he started back in 1997 to combat bullying and bring diversity into that district. Oh, goodness gracious. At the beginning of this last clip, I'm sorry, one other thing, if you want to contact me, because I'm going to be talking with Joe Quigley again. We're going to have like a second episode to this. So if you have something you want to ask him or want me to ask him for you, feel free to use the contact page on queerpublicradio.com. There's a contact button on there, and anybody can fill out that information and contact me that way. If you're on Facebook and you'd rather use Facebook, or if you're in one of those schools that doesn't allow you to listen to or visit queerpublicradio.com. Yeah, because obviously it's one of those sites. You can get us over on Facebook at facebook.com/QP Radio. Yeah, QP as in Queer Public. Yeah, facebook.com/QP Radio. All stuck together like it's one word. Check it out. At one point towards the beginning of this last clip with Joe and the conversation I had with him a couple of days ago, we heard Joe say the words, write it down. He was tired of what some of us would call lip service, and not in a good way. In fact, the purpose of his 12-year fight was simply to have Oklahoma City School District include the words sexual orientation and or transgender, along with others who were already in the diversity wording. Yeah, just wanted to add a couple more, to be a little bit more inclusive. And you would think in this day and time when we have so many young persons committing suicide, and I hesitate to state that the vast majority of them are members of the LGBT community, that kind of brings it to a head, doesn't it? I would think so. From 1997 to 2009, a 12-year battle Joe Quigley fought in Oklahoma City just simply to add a couple words in their diversity statement. Let's move on to the next clip I got with him. This is a shorter one. Hear a little bit more from Joe Quigley. So let's back here a little bit. Because you said you lived before, right? And did you teach there as well?
I taught middle school in Carson, right off 710 at Carnegie Junior High, Andrew Carnegie Junior High. And one of my proud things there, I have to admit, I love it. What they call it, United Teachers Los Angeles, the Union for the Teachers. I was the head of the Gay and Lesbian Caucus when we became a standing committee with the union. And I forget what year it was, 89 or 90. Myself and 5 other teachers marched in the Los Angeles Gay Pride Parade.
Oh wow.
With full sanction of the union that year. We were the first fully sanctioned union representative of Gay and Lesbian Caucus in the Los Angeles parade.
Wow.
That was a big moment, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. So
when I came to Oklahoma City, I certainly wasn't going to go back in the closet.
Well, what made you go to Oklahoma City?
Series of errors in judgment. Can we leave it with that? And I kid you not. I
mean, you did all things, but goodness, you stress and the anguish and everything you put upon yourself, that move, my goodness.
Well, one of the upside, one of the things that made it easier is having lived in Los Angeles, I could always go back there. I came out to my family years before, and even though my father was kind of like Archie Bunker, he slowly came around to accepting things. And the only threat they really had, they used it at one point in this process. It was pointed out to me that my being openly gay could be an embarrassment to my family. And I pointed out, my family doesn't come from here, and they're not embarrassed by me. Mm-hmm. And if that was their biggest threat, that I would embarrass my family, then I really didn't have to worry about it. And it was always in the back of my mind, if it really became unbearable, I could always go home, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of, to me, that gave me that, I don't know if you're familiar you are with New England transcendentalism, but I had the moral obligation. If I was from Oklahoma, and I know this from talking to other teachers that lived there, that would have been the thing that stopped them, because they would think of their family. You know, oh, this could embarrass your family. What are they going to do when they go to church? It's going to come up at work. Well, my family was 1,500 miles away in one direction, and a lot of my friends were 1,500 miles in the other direction. So I had nobody that could be threatened by my being out.
Mm-hmm.
But I had people on both coasts that could support me. So to me, I had the moral obligation to see it through because I had an advantageous position. I couldn't be personally hurt by it, unless I was, you know, beat up with a baseball bat or something. But
Right.
that was their biggest threat at one point: is this could embarrass your family. It's like, no, it won't. I've already gone through that phase.
We're past that.
Yeah, it's like I explained to the superintendent at one point because he was one of the superintendents. We had 12 superintendents in like 11 years, and he was concerned about that. And I said, no. I said, when I came out to my father, who at the time was like Archie Bunker, he had his gay prejudice and his racial prejudice. And I said, I hit him with a double whammy. Not only was I gay, but my boyfriend was black. I said, so I went through the worst possible thing. You know, I hit my father with two things at once. So as far as my father was concerned, in later years, I hit him with the two worst things possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what else could I hit him with? You know, so he had no problem with it. I've already got over that. He's a gay man in love with a black man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the rest was on the back burner.
Yeah, it's like, you know, what could be worse than that?
You left Oklahoma. That was it. That was the end of your teaching career when you went to the New England states.
Yeah, but it wasn't so much okay, it's more like No Child Left Behind than the gay thing or anything. It was teaching isn't fun anymore.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's all teaching to the test. And so I figured and I was kind of surprised. The union, I have to admit, was surprised because when I sat down with them and they told me, you know, they're going to try a second time to get rid of you. And I said, no. I said, that's distracting. You know, you've got the language in. I said, it was always about the language. I said, I don't want it to become about me. So I offered, like I said, the buyout. You know, pay me till the end of the year, pay my insurance. I won't sue you, this type of a thing, for anything up to this point, but God help you if you do anything after. They wanted me to agree to not telling anything about anything to anybody at any time. That was their only counteroffer. We'll give you everything you want if you sign an agreement that you will not tell anybody what you went through in Oklahoma.
Gag order. Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, there's two things wrong with that. Number one, it was 12 years of my life, and I'm not going to pretend those 12 years didn't exist. And I said, number two, it's already on the internet.
Yeah.
So I can't make that agreement. And they took that agreement away. The only thing I had to agree to was during the semester, which was last semester, that I sat home. I couldn't collect unemployment, which I couldn't because I was getting my regular salary. And I could never teach in Oklahoma City again. And of course, that second part just ripped my heart out. So even the union was surprised. They said, "We cannot believe you got everything you asked for." I said, "That's how scared they are. They knew they screwed up." And then the reason I left Oklahoma is my nephews own a house here on Cape Cod. One of them is living with his wife in Africa, South Africa. The other one moved with his wife, of all places, to Texas, where she got a job. And they just wanted somebody to watch their house for a year because it's going to go through all 4 seasons, and there's going to be nobody here to check on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, heck, I'm not working in Oklahoma right now. I got a house, no rent. I'm living on Cape Cod. It's a walk to the beach. I'd be an idiot not to take it.
Yeah.
And if I ended up having to teach again, I wouldn't mind it. It's just, it's not because of the frustration of what happened in Oklahoma City. It's the stupidity of this no child behind, test the kids till they drop stuff.
You know, I can only think about this whole thing with the unions. I got to ask you, because I can't believe that they're putting in the teachers union in with all the rest. I mean, that just kind of like is a big red flag, you know, because here they are just, they're trying to get rid of all unions, you know, because it's not, you know, so profitable for the business owners, you know, if they can't take advantage of their employees. I mean,
And you know, they forget it wasn't the unions and then management. It was management who made unions necessary. And to be honest with you, teachers unions, in my experience, it depends on what city you're in. Like Los Angeles, I don't know how they are now, but when I was out there, we went on strike. We were tough, you know, and we were like Teamsters out there. In Oklahoma City, it's like a club, you know. So they get something in Oklahoma, and oh my God, they're so thrilled. Oh, they're so thrilled, and it's like you guys got nothing. But for them, it's a strong thing. When I was in Boston teaching, it was strong. So it depends on the area. Oklahoma, I would get in fights with the union president, like even about my situation. It could have been prevented way back in like the year 2000, like when that paragraph J letter, when I was held to abide by it, and it was to all faculty and staff, and the principal didn't give it to any other member of the faculty or staff. In places like Los Angeles, that means that the grievance isn't over because he hasn't done his part of the situation.
mm-hmm.
And legally, he could be taken to court for ignoring the agreement. Out there it was the president, actually, this is the second president, not the first guy that fought with me or for me, on the same side as, let's put it that way. The second union president told me, you know, when you're open about being gay, you have to be ready to expect the type of treatment you're getting. And I went off the deep end on him on that because I might have to expect it, but it doesn't mean I have to accept it.
Right.
And he was always like, every time the union should have stepped in to make the treatment stop, he was always reluctant. And as a matter of fact, with the dismissal hearing, when I called for the trial de novo, he was reluctant to go ahead with it until the attorney for the union pointed out that I could decertify the union if we didn't take the next step.
Oh, wow.
So the union president had to be pulled in, and he was trying to be too conciliatory, which I found rather insulting because and at one point, when he was yelling at me for being pushy about like the trial de novo and some other stuff, I had to remind him that I'm a member of the rank and file. He was elected by the rank and file. I don't work for him. He works for me. I will not be yelled at by an employee. And, you know, they're kind of weak down. I feel bad for the teachers because even now, the contacts I have with teachers from Oklahoma, they're getting spit on left and right. It's really sad. And they, you know, like you hinted at, they lie about the teachers' unions. You know, we hate children. We're all out just for the teachers want more money. And, you know, somebody had a bad teacher somewhere in their career, so they think everybody's like that guy.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, yesterday we spoke with Michelle Brown, and she was, a tireless educational advocate up in the Detroit area. And she was telling us that they're expecting class sizes to be 60 to 65 students this coming year.
Yeah. And it's like they'll say, well, when you went to parochial school, you had 50 kids in a class. Yeah, but the nun could beat you to death if you misbehaved. You know? Nowadays, there's really nothing. The kids know they're in charge. And, the people not in the classroom don't understand that. You don't get to pick and choose who comes in your room. Like they'll say, well, look what happens in charter schools, or look at parochial schools. Yeah, but if you misbehave in a parochial school or a charter school, your big punishment is you get sent to the public school.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to pick who they want, but the public school has to take whoever comes through the door. And you have anywhere from very intellectual kids to kids who just don't have it. And you have kids who come from good households, and you have ones that come from hellholes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to teach all of them, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, a lot might say it's the economy and, both parents having to work and do all they can to keep a roof over their head. And, well, if that's the case, if that's what it takes in this, then, this is the price. And this is not not an acceptable price, that we have, the children suffering here because of the lack of supervision, and then all of it being dumped on the teachers, and basically kind of making you babysitters.
Yeah, and a parent.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
kids,
yeah.
they come up to you with problems that they want you to help solve because there's no parent to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't want to know, you hate the thing, but I don't want to know that's going on in your life.
Right, right.
First of all, because I don't know how to handle it, and the kid will come up to me with, he's having this problem. I'm the only one he can talk to. Now all of a sudden I have an obligation to try to do something about it, but I don't know what to do about it, And then if you discipline them, the way it is right now, and sadly, the administrators all want to look good. They don't know what the hell they're doing. No Child Left Behind comes in. Somebody says we have to improve education. They create a non-existent problem. So I'm running for office, and I can say, well, there's problems with education, and I have the solution. I never have to tell you what the problem is. I can pretend, okay? So it's like they're using education as the vote getter, and they don't talk to the people in the classroom. So the administrators will come up with some great solution, and all the teachers have to apply this great solution they've come up with, but it's irrelevant to the classroom. As a matter of fact, it can even complicate things in the classroom. But you got to do it because the administrator promised the school board that this was the program we're going to use, and you better do it. And if it doesn't work, the teacher gets in trouble, and the principal, oh, I did my best to have it work. It's the teacher that didn't cooperate. It's like, no, you don't have art appreciation for all the kids when you've got a room full of blind kids, unless you allow them to bring in sculpture. Oh, no, this program, it's all on projected pictures. It doesn't help the blind kid, but
Right.
you've got to pretend it's working so the administrator looks good. It's really sad. These kids are getting screwed.
Yeah, it really is terrible what they're doing with education. Something's going the wrong direction, that's for sure. They want to try this, they want to try that, but they don't got the money to fix it. But not that they're admitting that anything's wrong. It's just, it's more lip service.
Or the first person who comes along with what might be a solution, they grab at. And then they tell the teachers, you have to do this. And it's like, no, that's irrelevant to us. It's like you might have a classroom full of kids who are starving. So you want to get them food. But the person who goes before the school board sells clothes, and he's a great clothing salesman. So they buy the clothing. So you've got a bunch of kids who are very well dressed, but they're still starving to death.
Right, right.
But if they went to the teachers and said, what do you need? The teachers could say, we'd like somebody with food, so only buy from the salesman who's selling food. But they don't do that, though. It's whatever makes them look good, they buy into, and they force the kids that. Like I found out today, I didn't know this. I knew it was a large amount. But I found out this morning that half of the state budget for education in Oklahoma goes to testing companies.
Really? Really?
So, they'll say, well, 60 cents out of every tax dollar goes to education. And that sounds like a lot, but 30 cents out of that 60 cents per dollar goes to a testing company. Why doesn't it all go to the classroom,
Yeah.
And what are they testing? You don't have time to teach them anything. It's sad. In a way, I'm glad I'm out of it only because of that. The gay thing was one thing. That was kind of fun in a way. It had its moments. But I don't know, to stand in front of a classroom full of kids knowing that you really can't teach them anything. My sister-in-law was telling me that in Boston, she had preschool. She retired. And one year somebody came up with this great idea, a new way of teaching the kids their numbers. Now, she worked for 20-something years teaching preschool kids their numbers, and the kids learned their numbers. But instead of asking her, what is it you did so that every one of your kids who goes to the first grade knows their numbers, they came out with this new great program. They have to use those Scantron test bubble sheets, okay? And the way the kids learn their numbers is they learn to bubble in the test answer sheet in preschool.
Oh, wow, wow.
So if she says the number 4, they have to look for the number 4 and bubble it in. That's not getting the kids into numbers. That's teaching them how to take a test.
Mm-hmm.
So she retired because she can't teach anymore.
Yeah, it's atrocious. Like you say with this No Kid Left Behind. It's a farce. It's all of this. It's all a farce. They put a pretense of doing one thing, and what they actually do in reality is quite something different.
It's getting down to that. And
yeah.
they'll always say, well, the latest thing in education is you have to address the individual educational needs of each individual kid and approach it according to each individual student's ability, which you can't do like if you got 50 kids in a room.
Exactly.
I had my last class that I had before I retired, they mixed all the special ed kids in with all the regular ed kids, which is not too bad, except there's different types of special ed.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a kid in the room, a bunch of kids in the room that can't handle distraction, or they'll go nuts, right? But then you'll have kids in the same room where if you're taking a test, you have to read the directions and the questions out loud, because they can answer the questions if you read it to them, but they can't answer the questions if they have to read them themselves. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you have kids who can't have any distraction during a test. And somehow a teacher's got to be able to read the questions out loud without reading the questions out loud.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. They're just, and then of course, it's the teacher doesn't know how to teach the classroom, and that's what the problem is. Another thing they're doing, and this, I know they did this at that school where they had to get rid of all the teachers and only hire 50% back. They didn't hire back the teachers with experience. And they brought in all new, right out of college kids, wet behind the ears, who, I know my first year of teaching, I was going to save the world. And if my principal told me to go stand in the corner, I'd go stand in the corner. I'd never question why. All right? The older teachers will say, wait a minute, that's stupid. Here's a method that might work. So they're getting rid of all of the seasoned teachers because they'll question, they might have a better way of doing it, and they're bringing in all these young kids who are so eager to do whatever they're told, but they can leave in 2 or 3 years and start a new career doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel bad for the young teachers going, I got a part-time job right now, Starbucks. And one of the people there, she's going into elementary education. And my thing is, I didn't say it out loud, it's so pitiful because when she goes to do it, they'll probably eat her up, not the kids, but the administrators will probably eat her up and spit her out in 2 years. And she'll go off and do something else, maybe come back to Starbucks, as a career, when if they had left her alone, she would have been a fantastic teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't care because there's always somebody coming up to take your place.
Yeah, it's very sad that we have become a throwaway society in so many ways.
Teaching is no longer a career. It's a temporary position until you get driven into doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was reading an article, I forget the source. Like when I went into teaching, I was going to do it for my life. Okay, I was going to retire from teaching. So I would do everything I could to become a good teacher. Nowadays, the attitude is you go into teaching and you stay only a certain amount of years and then you go off and do something else. So the day of the career teacher is over.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though we hear a lot of people talking about it, oh, it's education. It's all. It seems education's going the wrong direction.
When I was teaching Shakespeare, okay, Romeo and Juliet. The sophomores have to take Romeo and Juliet. And if you really think about it, it's not one of Shakespeare's better plays. Okay? But he's got other ones where there's, like Titus Andronicus. If you look at the script from Shakespeare, every page somebody gets a body part cut off or somebody gets killed. And it's all done in iambic pentameter. And the kids would watch that and learn everything they could about Shakespeare. But instead, you got to force all of them to deal with Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of boring. Now, I tried it one year and got in trouble for it. When I saw the kids weren't really into Romeo and Juliet, I told them, I said, this isn't his best play. Let's try this one. And then I'll show you this play. You're going to love it. They absolutely loved Titus Andronicus. Okay? They learned everything they should have learned about Shakespeare, but they enjoyed it. But you can't do that. You have to teach them Romeo and Juliet because somebody somewhere decided that was the play all sophomores have to do. But who decided that? And it's like it might have been good in the 40s and 50s when kids didn't get married at the age of 13 and 14. And you would be fascinated. Ooh, they're cheating on their parents. They're having sex behind their parents' back. Now you have a whole classroom full of kids doing that. So whatever the fast pace was is gone, So they're into gangs. So show them a play with Shakespeare where it's more like gang-oriented. And then, they can get it, but you can't do it because some old fox somewhere decided, everybody's got to do this particular play.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids lose. You're right. The kids lose. And I've seen my last class was seniors. And they were all supposedly going to college. That's the other thing. Forget about carpenters and plumbers. All kids who go to school have to go to college. And I had seniors, and I asked them to write an essay about themselves. Where do they expect to be in 10 years? This is the first thing I had them do. And what they think they have to do in order to get there. And they couldn't put sentences together. They could take a test. There's a certain tricks you can do, and a dummy can take a test and do well if you remember, like, there's 3 or 4 tricks. Like if you don't know the answer and the multiple choice test, usually the shortest answer is the right one. So the kids learn that. If you have 4 choices and 2 of them are obviously the wrong answer, you get a 50-50 chance out of the remaining 2 to get it right, and that's better odds than Vegas. So you really don't have to know anything to pass a standardized test and do passably well on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But ask these kids to, when their pencil goes dull, they'll tell you that their pencil is dull. They won't think, I guess I'll go up to this pencil sharpener. And you got to tell them, well, go use the sharpener. because they can't think ahead. And it's these kids couldn't put a sentence together. So I figured, okay, their senior year before I left and before they graduated, they were going to be able to fill out a college application and write essays that were acceptable for college admission. That wasn't the curriculum. That's not going to be on the test. So I was made to teach only the things that would be on the test where they don't really have to write, and these kids did very well on tests. But when they filled out applications for scholarships, I would do that at writing practice. I had one college come to me and, why am I sending them this stuff? It's totally unacceptable. And I had a college admissions person sit in my classroom and actually saw me being prevented by the principal from teaching these kids how to write a decent sentence because that wouldn't be on a test. And it opened her, this is Oklahoma University, it opened her eyes that the reason they're getting kids who can't function their freshman year in college is they took the test to get into college and did well, but they don't have the practical knowledge to back up the test.
Mm-hmm.
And I got in trouble for that, so.
Yeah, goodness gracious, common sense and having that.
Yeah, the kids cannot think anymore. They cannot think.
That's true shame.
I had a friend who taught math, and her thing is she's glad she's older than the kids because she'll be dead before they blow up the world. But her biggest fear is when she's in the old folks' home, these are the caregivers.
Yeah.
And she said the example she always uses is she has to take 2 pills. And one of these kids will come in with 1 pill in each hand and not give her the 2 pills because she's supposed to take 2 pills. And when they open their right hand, there's only 1. And when they open their left hand, there's only 1. But she's supposed to take 2. And they won't have the ability to think, well, if I put them both in one hand, here's the 2 pills.
Yeah. That's so sad. But that's
also a lot of teaching.
Mr. Joe Quigley, who started fighting for diversity in the Oklahoma City School District back in 1997, only to, surprisingly, undertake a 12-year battle to do so. Yeah, 12 years, from 1997 to 2009. It took a gay teacher to get them to add sexual orientation wording to their diversity statement for the school district. Of course, it was Oklahoma City. And that's who we've been talking with, is Joe Quigley. So September 7th will be a Wednesday, our next show, and what I plan to present at you that time is the second part of this whole Joe Quigley story, where we can get more of it. I think it's interesting because for many reasons. First off, Joe hasn't been retired that long, you know. Yeah, it was like, 2010. He was actually the honorary Grand Marshal for the Oklahoma City Gay Pride. Yeah, he rode in I think it was a bright red T-Bird convertible. It was a nice looking car, and an older one. And there he was holding up his big banner. Like he said he did at every Pride event there, that he went to every Pride event when he was in the city. Holding up his big banner that says gay teacher. Big lettering, big bold lettering, gay teacher, holding up his banner above his head. And that's what he was doing when he was the... in 2010 kind of makes sense because he got the wording put in 2009, I do believe. So in 2010, he definitely deserved the title of being the honorary Grand Marshal of Oklahoma City Pride. He says the event is a huge event, and I'm thinking, goodness gracious, in a clips you'll hear. The parts that you didn't hear today, you will hear on the next show for sure. And we're probably going to get into more of the whole legal battle and the specifics surrounding that. Anything you heard on here, and Joe has assured me, he has documentation to back it all up. So this isn't, like he said, and you heard in the audio today, he has 2 binders that are, as thick as his thumb is long. So full of documents. The gentleman, can back up anything he has stated. So I think that's an awesome thing. So Joe Quigley, yeah, awesomeness. Thanks for spending a little bit of your time here on queerpublicradio.com, folks. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you on September 7th, because like I said, I'm going to take a break here for the next week. All the best to you and yours, and adieu for now.